Today we're working on a Phillips TV, model number 47pfl3603d /27. TV's not turning on, so in order to take it apart, you'll need a T10 times 3 is just the length, but T10 torch screwdriver to get the screws out. You don't have to take the Phillips screw for the stand off, but you have to get all the rest of the screws out through the back of the receiving screws in here, there's one here for the power, all the way around the edge. And once you get that taken all the way out, then you should be able to pop your back cover off. So what you're going to find in the TV is the power board, the main board, and that's the T-con board. So we're going to focus mostly on this power board, and we're going to look for these guys here called capacitors. These are all capacitors, and they have a plus and a minus, just like a battery. So you have to have that lined up as well. You see this little black notch down here on the board? That's where the negative goes. So when you're installing capacitors, you have to make sure that the negative matches that little notch there. So let me show you how to identify one that's bad. You see how this is flat? And down here, that one's got a peak to it. And that other one, you can actually see that it's got a brown goop coming out of it. Same as that one. That's electrolytic fluid that these capacitors had released under pressure. So these three capacitors here are bad. In order to take the board off, you have to use the same screwdriver. And there are 8 screws here. There are 5 connectors actually. One here for the power. And you have these here, which are pretty simple to take off. Same way with these. They have a little button on the side here, so you can press it and you pull up. Be careful not to break these. So take 8 screws out, and next I'm going to show you how to replace these 3 capacitors. Fix your TV. A couple of things you need to do in order to repair this board is obtain a soldering iron of some sort. You can go to Walmart and buy a $5 one out of the automotive section or the electrical section. Get some solder. You need a pair of wire cutters. Obviously the capacitors that are bad. And a simple toothpick. Now the toothpick is used for simple heating. When you heat the hole for the leads for the capacitor to come through, you're going to shove this in the hole to widen it so these will be able to shove through. I find that doing this kind of a video setup for home users, they can utilize what they have at home and buy a cheap tool to fix their television rather than telling you to go buy a solder wick or a solder suction pump in order to remove the solder from the hole, which are like $20–30 for the product, and one-time use that you're ever going to use this probably, unless you start yourself a business, and then you might be able to use it in the future. But a $5 cheap soldering iron, some solder, cheap wire cutters, and 3 capacitors is going to fix this television. I'm going to show you how to remove the capacitors itself. So when you heat up the iron, or when you plug in your iron, you're going to put the iron on the lead just like so. And then while you have that heated up, you're going to take your finger, and when the lead that you have it on, you're going to push it to the opposite direction, and then you'll let it cool. And by letting it cool, I mean remove the soldering iron. And then you're going to do the same thing to the other side. You'll heat this up, and then you're going to push that downward, and then you remove your soldering iron. and you're just working your capacitor out of the circuit board. Is what you're doing. So let's talk about the values of the capacitors and how to look them up. This says it is a 1000 UF 50 volt. That's all you need to search. 1000 UF 50 volt. That stands for 1000 microfarad 50 volts. That's what this capacitor is rated for. The other two small ones are 470 microfarad 16 volt. So whatever capacitor is on here that's swelled up, just type in the number that's on there. If it says 2200 UF, then search 2200 UF. If it was me, I would go ahead and replace all these capacitors in the circuit. There are capacitor kits that you can buy on eBay for like $25. That'll give you all the capacitors that you need to replace this. So you're only opening it one time. So let's get to removing the capacitor. This is a butane soldering iron, ISO tip, Solder Pro 90. I am not endorsed by them by any means. This is something they sent to me last year, and I've stuck to it and using it. You do not have to buy this. It's just a butane soldering iron. I can use this anywhere that I want. I don't have to worry about electricity. That's why I like it. So let's get to removing it. Like I said, get my finger on the capacitor and I am going to shove it towards you when I'm heating the bottom lead of the capacitor. Let's watch this together. See how I did that? Now I'm going to heat up the top one. Sometimes you have to add a little solder to it to get it going. And it just popped right out. So the one thing about soldering is you do not want to create what they call a solder bridge. Is you don't want solder to be touching on other components when you're removing or installing these. So keep that in mind. Is when you're soldering this, don't put a solder blob across traces that do not belong there. Keep it in the same pad that you just have it on. Now I'm going to zoom in and show you the toothpick method. Let's see if I'm in the right area. I am. So I'm going to heat up the hole, the via, and I just shoved the toothpick right there in that hole, just like that. And I have a hole. Let's do this a second time. Sometimes you can get lucky and the solder will go away and it'll go onto your soldering iron. And that's all you have to do for removing the capacitor. Installing it, really simple. I'm going to shut my iron off. Remember when I told you guys about negatives and positives? Negative line on the capacitor is this side. And on the board you'll see that it's got a notch right here. This is the dark notch. That is the negative side. Also, negative is always the shorter leg of the capacitor. Keep that in mind. And we're just going to put it in like that. I don't know if you're able to see that. So let's repeat that. It's just like, it's simple. You're just inserting it into the hole. And now you have these two legs. Get this situated. You have the two legs sticking out. Soldering the capacitor now can be a little bit tricky for somebody that does not know what they're doing. I have videos on my channel that if you want to find them, you can. how to solder, how to remove a capacitor and all that. So it's really simple. I'm holding it on the leg of the capacitor and I'm going to feed this solder. And it may take it a second if the iron is not clean or if it's not hot enough to heat up the lead. That's it. That's all you gotta do. So, once you get all of your capacitors changed out, make sure you do the next important task. They have, the leads are still on there. This is what the wire snips are for. And cut them off so you don't have that shorting against the case of your television set. The case of the television set is what they call the chassis of the TV. Essentially, it's the same ground as neutral coming out of the wall. So you do not want to short out your capacitors. You're going to have a big bang that you don't really want to hear or see. I'm going to finish up changing these capacitors. I'm going to install the board back onto the TV. I'm going to set the TV up, and I'm going to show you that it's working. Okay, show you that it works. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.